psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Child Mind Institute is a national nonprofit that supports children and families by providing gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all of which are now online and accessible to everyone. You can learn more about the resources that we have available for families during the coronavirus crisis, including telehealth evaluations and treatment, by visiting us at childmind.org/coronavirus. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how you can help your children focus and resist distraction while engaging in remote learning. And some of the advice and principles might be helpful for adults as well, who are now suddenly finding themselves working from home amidst a lot more activity than they're used to contending with during the workday. So I'll be providing some guidance up front, and then I'll answer some questions about that topic as well as anything else that you're wondering about. So please post your questions in the feed. We'll also post some links to helpful resources on childmind.org, as well as the details about the next Facebook Live. Remember, we're here every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. and at 4:30, and we look through your questions daily. Before I get to your questions, I want to just go through a couple of sort of big bullet items to help, just broad items to help with focus and resisting distraction when kids and teenagers are engaging in their remote learning lessons. The first is really to set your child up for success. That includes attending to the physical needs of your child, including sleep, nutrition, exercise. If your child takes medication, make sure that she or he takes it as prescribed. Make sure that your child and you are all attaining sufficient sleep at night. We know that that's really critical for attention span, for learning consolidation, for emotional well-being, and for physical health and immunity. So those things that might be particularly important now, but sleep is important at all times. And that your child is eating a good breakfast before getting started in schoolwork. Also, trying to make sure that your child has a dedicated workspace. This is another thing that I think can be challenging for a lot of families right now, with a lot of competing workers vying for quiet space to get stuff done. But if you can try to find a quiet or solitary place for your student to at least devote their academic attention to, that's ideal. There are some kids, though, who are going to need a space that's a little closer to a parent so that the parent can make sure that they're monitoring them and keeping a closer eye to make sure that they're engaged in their work. We know that most kids associate learning with a classroom, and it can be really hard for them to get into the mindset to learn in the middle of the den or the kitchen. And at the same time, your child may need more monitoring and support for you. So for some kids, that kitchen table might make the most sense. Wherever you decide you can maximize your child's focus and engagement, make sure that the setting is calm, quiet, well-lit, and distraction-free. Your child might also need some help resisting distractions, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in more detail. This is something that I think parents can relate to as well, and so I'll talk about some tips for that. Another big tip for setting kids up for success at the beginning is to make sure that you're getting out of pajamas. I think that, again, kids are used to doing their work in school where the structure, the environment, the teaching style, everything is really designed to maximize learning, and they might need help structurally to set the environment up around them to optimize learning. Simply changing from pajamas from the night before into another set of clothes, even if that set of clothes is sweatpants, is another cue that helps to separate the child from the relaxation of nighttime into the productive time of the school day, and to separate it from, being around the house on weekends or on vacation days. These aren't weekends or vacation days. We do need our kids to realize that they need to get into the mindset of doing some schoolwork. Making sure that you're reviewing the schedule for the day. Kids as well as adults benefit from knowing what's to come, how long something's going to last, and then an enjoyable task is going to follow something that's maybe less appealing. So make sure that you're working together to develop a schoolwork plan for the day. Older kids might be able to do that more on their own, but make sure that you're checking in with them. Along those same lines, really make sure that you're structuring the day and trying to remain as consistent as you can. So that might include waking up at the same time, eating consistent meals at the same time, keeping bedtimes and bedtime routines the same. When you're thinking about scheduling your students' school day, try to schedule academic periods in short chunks, and also bear in mind Developmental expectations for how long a child can be expected to focus. We don't expect 6-year-olds to be able to remain engaged in schoolwork as long as we might expect a teenager. We also need to be mindful that teenagers probably have a maximum attention span of about 45 minutes. So sitting them down at 9 a.m. and expecting them to just work straight through lunch might not be realistic and is just setting them up for feelings of frustration and failure. So make sure that you're bearing in mind that kids really do need those time periods chunked down for them. And I can talk a little bit more about what those time frames might need to look like. Make sure they're scheduling work time at times when kids are most likely to be engaged. That's typically in the morning, after breakfast, after a short lunch break. Teenagers might be better engaged a little bit later in the morning. We know that they naturally wake up and go to sleep later, so it's okay if your teenager, for the time being, might express some interest in sleeping in a little bit and maybe getting to work closer to 10, although I would make sure that there is some structure around that, so we're not allowing our teenagers to sleep until noon or 1 and then delaying the whole day. The last structural thing is just to make sure that you're really incorporating breaks at regular intervals. So when you're scheduling those academic time periods, make sure that, again, the length of it is developmentally appropriate, and that you're incorporating breaks that provide opportunities for physical movement, outdoor play, etc., really to help recharge kids' focus and to facilitate their learning and emotional well-being. If you find that your child seems to be struggling more than you might expect to stay focused, you might check in with the teacher and see what's reasonable to expect in terms of how much time he or she is spending on tasks and how much independence you should expect of your student in order to stay engaged in work. And the teacher might also have some strategies of some ways that you can modify the work to make it more manageable for your student. I would also, using time management techniques such as a timer is a really nice way to do a couple of things. It's a nice way to help kids stay focused for limited periods of time, and also to increase their awareness of time, and to provide them some opportunity to be independent. So you might say, I'm gonna have you work on this activity for 15 minutes. Let's set a timer. I'm gonna come back and check in on you in 15 minutes and see how you've done. Again, you're helping them to understand what that 15-minute period feels like. You're helping them to realize that it's only 15 minutes that they need to remain engaged in it, so it's not this interminable period of time that they need to spend focusing on a specific academic task. You're communicating to them that you trust them to sit there and get work done without you sitting next to them and looking over their shoulder. And it also gives you an opportunity to attend to some of the things that you might need to attend to during this period of time. Some kids might need help chunking work, so breaking tasks down into smaller and more manageable parts. They might see I know some schools are really varying in terms of how they're rolling out the remote learning. Some schools are sending home packets, and so the idea of sitting down with a packet of materials and just getting into it can be really overwhelming for kids. So it might mean cueing their attention to one page at a time, or perhaps even saying, why don't you work on these 2 rows of math problems, and then we'll take a break and move on to something else. So those are just some ways to really help kids to break down and chunk larger, multifaceted, multi-component academic tasks that might contribute to feelings of overwhelmment. The last big ticket item I want to say is really try to keep your interactions as positive as possible. It could be hard for your kids to suddenly accept that mom and dad are now suddenly my teacher. And it could be hard for you to suddenly step into the role of teacher. I'm sure it is hard for parents right now to step into the role of teacher, especially in the context of all of the other things that they're trying to balance. But really the most important thing right now that parents need to be providing their kids are feelings of love and security. So if you notice that your child is becoming frustrated by an assignment, perhaps suggest that they take a break and return to it when they've had some time to regroup after a little while. We can talk about using incentives in order to get them started on tasks, developing rewards for sticking with and finishing their work, making sure that you're providing a lot of specific labeled praise, focusing on growth rather than perfection. So if you're noticing that your child is doing a really nice job of sticking with a math assignment that has historically been challenging for him, and can maybe do it for 5 minutes without you sitting next to him as opposed to 1 minute pointing those small increments of progress out are a really nice way to acknowledge and to appreciate the hard work and growing that your child is doing. I think, it's hard to sit in front of a computer and to get work done especially with all of the temptations now that the internet has to offer. I think that most working parents can relate to sitting down. They have a deadline or a project that they need to a project that they need to get done, or a deadline that they need to meet, and suddenly all those tabs on the internet are flying all over the place. And now imagine what it's like to do that with the brain that's not yet fully developed, and specifically the part of the brain that controls inhibition, or the ability to resist temptation, is still under construction through adolescence, and maybe even, we know, even into the mid-20s. So they really do need your help. I think I'm sure it can be very frustrating that we're all stressed, we're all tired, we all are contending with anxiety and uncertainty and managing a lot of competing demands, and we're frankly perhaps worn down, and I think it's easy to become frustrated when your student just needs to get that work done so that you can sit in your part of the apartment or the house and focus on something that you need to focus on. But it's hard. They really do need your help to keep them to maximize their attention. They really do need help putting in place the structural supports that are going to help them to maximize their attention. So again, that's through creating a dedicated workspace for them that's quiet, distraction-free, well-lit, not their bed, not a couch, not something that they're going to associate with sleep or with other activities. Avoiding double screening. So if they're in front of the computer, there's no need for them to be on their phone or their iPad. They don't need to have multiple screens out at the same time. And at the same time, they shouldn't be having multiple tabs open at the same time unless the assignment that they're doing requires them to be tabbing back and forth. So those are the restrictions that I think that we should be setting for our kids when they're doing work, certainly on computers. Making use of distraction blockers. There's some great ones, including Leech Blocker, Freedom, etc. Specifically during those schoolwork periods, and then they can be lifted when kids get finished with their work, and those more appealing sites can perhaps even be used as rewards. And try to have compassion for what they're doing. I saw a great quote in social media world today, actually. This was said by Sean Peck. I don't have his permission to say this quote, so I hope this is allowed. But Sean Peck is an assistant principal at a high school in Minnesota, and he posted, have you ever taken an online class? How about 6 at once? When you were a teenager with spotty Wi-Fi and Schoology crashing and needing to share a device with siblings while being trapped at home filled with fear and anxiety? Yeah, me neither. Let's cut these kids some slack. And I think that is something that we all should try to keep in mind. This is hard. This is new for everybody, and it's new for these kids who it's understandable that they're struggling at times. So to the extent that we can try to put in place the structure that we know that they need, and also have compassion for what they're going through, I think those things will go a really long way. So I have been talking for a very long time. I'm going to turn over to some of the questions that that have come through. There's a question about ADHD. My son has ADHD. How can I help him stay on track with school now that we're remote? So this is definitely something that's challenging for a lot of families and kids right now, including many of the families and kids with whom I work. Kids with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or executive functioning weaknesses, they struggle to focus on schoolwork under the best of circumstances, and there is nothing ideal right now about home-based learning. So again, I'm going to go back to those big points that I've already tried to stress. Set him up for success. Attend to the physical needs. Does he take medication? Is he taking the medication as prescribed? Is he getting sufficient sleep? Is he eating healthily? Is he getting regular exercise? Trying to put in place the structure that we talked about. So consistent wake time, consistent meals, chunking the day down, and really trying to map out what each block of time looks like and what he's going to do during, I'm very sorry, each of those blocks of time, and stick with a schedule to the extent that you can consistently. It's a really great way of helping kids to feel secure and to get through the day. Alternate appealing and less appealing activities. So if you know that math, or I keep going back to math for me was my area of avoidance, I should say. So I tend to use that as the example, but maybe your son doesn't like science. So really trying to follow up a science assignment with something that's much more intrinsically motivating for him. So if he really loves art and he has an art project to do, try to sneak that in right after that science assignment, so he knows that he has something exciting to look forward to. And I don't know the age of your son, but he may need more one-on-one support, depending on the age, depending on the severity of his ADHD. Definitely try to communicate with teachers, check in with his teacher to see if she has thoughts about how independent he should be, what the level of independence that he's really capable of is. It's interesting. I think this experience is really giving many parents a glimpse into their kids' lives at school. No matter how many parent-teacher conferences parents have gone to, no matter how many IEP meetings parents have gone to, nothing shows them the real life day-to-day struggle that a lot of kids experience in trying to remain focused in school. This might be amplifying it, because I think that these circumstances certainly exacerbate any pre-existing or non-existent attentional struggles, but I think the parents are certainly seeing a little bit more about what their kids' experiences in school is like, and so I'm hopeful that parents can feel a little bit more empathy for their students, for their teachers, through really observing these things on a firsthand basis. So we have a question that just came through Facebook. How do you handle perfectionist tendencies in elementary-aged kids? So this is a great question. Typically, I think in the days of coronavirus, the answer is different. I think coronavirus, one of my colleagues says over and over again, coronavirus and perfection do not mix. That I think refers to how parents should have empathy for themselves and for their students and for everyone who's really just trying to do their best. I think that's not exactly what this Facebook question refers to. Typically we often see perfectionistic tendencies. We see it in a lot of kids. We see it in very high achievers who just really don't have tolerance for substandard performance or for making mistakes. And we see it often in kids who have underlying anxiety conditions. So not knowing anything about this, I think that I like to say, I think it's really great to model tolerance for mistakes as a parent, and praise effort as opposed to product, so that you're more focused on their process. We know there's a lot of research about grit as being an amazing ingredient for long-term success and for academic and vocational outcomes. Grit, above and beyond intelligence, predicts long-term outcomes, and grit is fostered by a focus on the process, how hard, really trying to praise, I love how hard you're working, I love how you're sticking with this even though this is challenging, as opposed to really focusing on the product. So I think to the extent that you can try to take your child's focus away from the product and really model that what you care about is how hard he or she is working or what he's learning from the process, can help. And again, if there's a deeper underlying anxiety component, then I think that's something that perhaps needs to be addressed differently in a more clinical way. But I think right now, really trying to provide support for all types of emotional needs that kids are expressing, that might, if they're popping up for the first time. And let's see what else we have. We have another question. My kids really thrive with a schedule, but I'm not the most organized person alive. Any tips for creating a workable, reasonable schedule at home? Great question. I think this is something that a lot of families are contending with right now. We also know a lot of these things, kids inherit strengths and areas of relative difficulty from their parents. So oftentimes we have kids who have trouble coming up with organized structures themselves, have parents who aren't the best at creating those organized structures for them. So there are certainly a lot of templates out there on childmind.org. I actually don't think that it's up just yet. It is for the K through 2 set, but we've created a couple of sample remote learning guides for kids preschool through college age that are slowly being edited and published to our website. So certainly check online for that. It has a really nice way of breaking down the day and giving some suggested tips in terms of just academic activities that parents can engage their kids with, but also just literally a structure for or a sample schedule. Khan Academy also has some nice templates that parents can turn to and download for free. But in the meantime, I would say really start by anchoring your day with kind of the big anchors. So having a set wake time, a set bedtime, set meal times, and then within that, trying to create little blocks of time. So perhaps depending on the age of your child, between each meal, there might be time for 3 to 4 activity chunks, again, depending on the age and the attention span of your child. So thinking, wake up, we get dressed, we have breakfast, lunch is at 12 o'clock, whatever time works for you and your family. And between breakfast and that lunchtime, trying to, come up with 3 or 4 different activities for your child to engage in. And that should alternate between academic tasks and something that's a little bit more active to get their energy out a little bit and also to give them a break. And then same thing for that time between lunch and dinner, trying to think about like 3, 4, 5 chunks of time and filling each of those chunks with either an academic school-related activity or a non-school related activity, some playtime outside, building with Legos. Even screen time can be incorporated in a mindful and strategic way for kids. Another question. Our house is crowded and loud. There's not much to be done about it, and there's nowhere else to go. My daughter says she can't concentrate on school or her homework, and she's feeling really upset about falling behind. How can I help? So this is a great question, and something that I think probably a lot of people are also struggling with. I would say, first of all, really try to acknowledge and validate those feelings. This is a stressful time for everybody, but it might be hard to remember that kids' academic and social lives were completely disrupted. So whether there are pre-existing, like true neurobiological attention issues or not, I'm sure she's experiencing frustration with her difficulty getting her work done, and perhaps just more broadly with the major pivot that she and her classmates have had to make with their schooling in general. So I would, again, first sit down, acknowledge and validate those feelings of frustration, which are very real, and also there might be something deeper there that she's communicating in that, which is just the frustration and perhaps anxiety that this whole situation is bringing to all of us. And then after that, I would sit down and try to problem solve with her. So what in particular is limiting her concentration? Is it that she feels she doesn't have a quiet space to work? If that's the case, can you try to carve out, even if it's a small corner of the apartment that can become her designated workspace or a place in her room, separate from her bed, but really trying to build a workspace for her and set it up in the way that she feels like it'll maximize her work? Is it that there's a noisy environment? Can you try to make a schedule with the rest of your family and schedule her academic activities during naps or rest time, or just other moments when the house and the rest of the family can try to be a little bit more mindful of time? Is it that the schoolwork itself is challenging? Can you try to elicit a tutor or a homework helper at low cost? I know that there are a lot of websites where college students who are unexpectedly home early and now have more time are offering to provide low cost both academic and just general homework support for kids through things like Zoom. And I would assure her that this is temporary. It's our hope, again, that we'll be up and running soon. I don't know when that is. And she's in no different of a situation than her peers. So teachers are really, in the fall, going to have to modify curricula to meet the kids where they are. And she'll be starting from the same place, more or less, as her classmates. So to the extent that can provide some reassurance, I would also try to emphasize that. Let's see. So we have just a couple more minutes. There's one more question about creating a calm and clear workspace in a small apartment. Depending on people's living situations, I think it can be really hard to find for kids to feel like they can carve out time to get work done. if you're more pressed for space, consider having your students set up in the kitchen, which may offer them a table that they need for all their work supplies. If that's not doable, maybe corner off a part of the living room or your child's bedroom. But again, please try to discourage kids from using places that they typically nap or sleep. We know that doing homework in bed can make it harder to focus and perhaps cue some somnolent feelings or the desire to go to sleep. And also when it comes time to go to sleep, sometimes kids who do work in bed feel more anxious and kind of get a little revved. So we try to avoid the bed. Make sure there's plenty of natural light. Eliminate any non-essential clutter. Ensure that you have everything that you need to get your work done before sitting down and getting started. So you have pen, paper, your books, a computer with a wireless connection, et cetera, all the materials that your student needs so that they don't have to keep on getting up and down and kind of interrupting their workflow. So those are the questions that we see. So I'm going to start to wrap up. I want to thank everyone today for joining me. I hope that this was helpful. Remember, we're here every day, Monday through Friday at 10 and again at 4:30. We look through your questions daily. Please check the post on Facebook for the topic of our next Facebook Live, which is Monday morning at 10 with Matt Pogorski, who will be talking about how to support kids with dyslexia during COVID. I also want to say that it's Friday, so yay. Congratulations, everyone. We made it through another week. I know the weekdays and the weekends sort of blend into one right now, and it's hard to remember that the weekend is intended to be kind of a break and change out of your maybe weekday pajamas into your weekend pajamas and really try to acknowledge the weekend, take time to relax, do some enjoyable things, enjoy your family, and have a great weekend. So finally, the Child Mind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. Please see our website. We have resources to help from daily tips to consultations to gold standard telehealth treatments. All of those are listed on childmind.org/coronavirus. Be safe, everyone, and thank you.